Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another week of Growing with my fellow growers. I'm your host, Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it first to Spartan Grown.
Thanks, Jack. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word, no spaces, or you could shoot me an email if you don't do social media at spartangrown@gmail.com, and I can help you with all of your gardening questions. If you have any LED questions, shoot me an email at russ@gmlarmy.com, and I can help you there too.
Happy to have you back. Next up, we got Dr. MJ.
Hey guys, I'm Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. I am happy to be here this week. I've been getting a lot of Sunday afternoon activities, so I'm not able to be here every time, but I'm happy to be here today. Looking forward to a good show.
Happy you can make it. And we're also happy that we have Matthew Gates.
Yeah, everyone, happy to be here too. And yeah, if you'd like to see me, I'll be at the Nevada event, the Prump Nevada event, the Living Soil Summit, March 7th, 8th, and 9th. I'm excited. I've been preparing a really cool presentation about basically how you have to stay ahead of the adaptation curve in pests and really everything in life, but we'll get into that in the presentation. But yeah, happy to talk here. I think we'll be doing chat Q&A, you said?
That is correct. And last of the panelists we have this evening who are currently with us is Noah the Grower.
How's it going, everybody? Yeah, I'm Noah the Grower. I'm on Instagram, and I always try and have fun on Instagram and post some posts. I haven't done it for a little while, but I think I'm going to maybe do one here during the show, and happy to be here.
Happy to have you. It looks like we got Brandon Russ will be joining us in just about a minute. I just saw him pop up in the Zoom. But I'm about to go ahead and pin my message in the chat. Make sure you see the view all messages or live chat if you want to make sure you're staying up to date with everything that's going on in the chat. I just did that myself, as well as pinned on the Cheap Home Grow page. Tag us with all your questions. If you do that, it'll show up in orange on my page, or you could tag at Spartan Grown or anybody else who's currently here. And we'll be more likely to see and answer your questions. We copy and paste them over into our Zoom and get to them as quickly as we can, but we do try to address each question that we get fairly thoroughly. So sometimes we hang out on one for quite a while. But with all that being said, I believe that Brandon Rust is now with us. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Brandon?
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
What's going on, everybody? Brandon Rust here. If you're not familiar already, you can find me at rust.brandon on Instagram, and you can check out my website at bokashiearthworks.net.
Happy to have you. And it looks like we're going to have the American one joining us in about a minute. So maybe I'll fill a little bit of time. I haven't seen any questions, but it looks like we got Smart Poker, Iceni, Anything Grows, a whole lot of good people. Seed Person One, the Jeffro 42069, and many other great people in the chat already. Marcus Green Thumb, welcome everybody. And also welcome to the American one who just joined us.
Oh shit.
We can hear
Am
you.
I muted or no?
You're good.
Oh, I was already unmuted. All right. What's up,
Go.
everybody? I'm the American one on YouTube and the American one underscore with underscore Keys on the IG. It's always good to be here, and yeah, it's good to see everybody in chat. And yeah, peace.
Happy to have you back. We're just doing some Q&A tonight, so encouraging all the panelists to tag us and drop their questions. It's kind of funny that when you came in, the first thing you said was like, oh shit, not realizing that if you were muted or not muted. But it reminds me of a few weeks ago, I was with my wife, and we went to this event, and this company, they, I guess, were having like a business meeting, and this guy was on the call, and he had himself muted. But when he went into the car or like out of the car, when it transitioned to Bluetooth to whatever it was on the vehicle, it unmuted him. And so when he was driving, somebody cut him off. So he goes like, "Oh, what the fuck!" Right in the middle of like a kind of serious business meeting, but it was like right at a gap in conversation. So everybody just kind of like busted out laughing, and it kind of broke the ice. So it's occasionally nice when somebody has that hot mic moment and drops a little bit of a curse and
A little
lets it
bit
off.
of oops.
Hey, this is an explicit show anyway. I always mark not for kids. This is
There you
explicit
go.
content on Spotify, YouTube, whatever. We're not trying to get monetized. This is just for the education of the community. It's for 18 and up, unless you know
I think
parental.
that should be Tao's new tagline. He just starts all his introductions that way.
With that said, how's everybody doing tonight?
Doing good. I'm doing good. I just got a nice big dab in my lungs, so I'm warm, very warm.
Seed Person One has a good question. Does anyone know the terpenes responsible for the halitosis smell slash taste?
It's pretty specific. I don't know that I've had halitosis
And that's really not one of
before.
my favorite ones.
I think that's different things for different people. Halitosis smell. That's usually an oral microbiome thing. I don't know. I don't know what they mean by that. It's a little bit I
Well,
don't know. They mean like
halitosis
body odor? That could be
A
like
little
some
bit.
people use terms like that which are a little bit
wasn't
vague. But I don't know
halitosis
what they mean by that.
invented
I
by
just
like the marketing industry trying to sell mouthwash?
I
Like it
Is
was
that
just
what
suspect
a
bad breath.
grandpa's breath?
You only think that if you haven't met somebody that has it.
no, I
Mm,
agree that halitosis, like bad breath, exists, but that term
But
halitosis, I
no,
actually think
like
originally.
specifically noxious bad breath. Like everybody can have bad breath after they eat like some onions or something.
pepperoni.
But there's a condition that gives you like really notable bad breath.
Like tooth decay and like teeth rot and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
exceptionally
it feels
uncared
like
for teeth.
something's putrefying in their mouth or something. It's like, ooh, that's kind of off-putting. And yeah, it's one of these sort of like, I don't know, people use these kind of, they borrow from really nasty smells in like our world to describe some of the terpenes that have, you know, rather noxious odors to them. But I experience them differently, like cat piss or whatever. Like it doesn't really hit me the same way that the noxious odor would hit me. I don't, if Bud really smelled like halitosis breath, I don't think I'd go near it. Like that's pretty off-putting.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like, and it's easy to say like, oh, this tastes like, zombie brain, whatever, and it's like, okay, that's cute and interesting. But
Zombie
like
brains are delicious,
actual,
Matthew.
yeah, it would be, but actual or like death breath, right? I mean, when I think of it, it sounds cool and I like it, but obviously I think it goes without saying, right? It's like explaining the joke. If something was actually, putrescent, I
Right.
don't know. But like we said a couple of episodes ago, we were just talking about people taking a little drinky drink of their ancestral like cemetery fluid or funeral fluid, which is pretty gross. Yeah. So
I mean, if
people have done
I don't think
terrible
they do it
things.
for the flavor, Matthew.
No, they don't, but they do it. So I mean,
I think,
you
I
would know
mean,
better than me about that, right?
Yeah, there are pretty bizarre funerary rites in different cultures around the world for sure, but it's often not a very pleasant experience, I think. And you know, smoking cannabis or using cannabis should be a pleasant experience. I think people like them because uh, they have that particular, but it's like a pleasant noxious odor. It's not like a really unpleasant noxious odor. I don't know exactly how to explain it. It's different though than, you know, some people like smelling mothballs or markers or something like that.
I
Like
think some of it's an acquired taste. Like I never was bothered by skunk as a kid, but a lot of people were really like, ugh, skunk, it smells so gross. But I also enjoy
I always liked
back
it.
in the day skunky smelling cannabis.
but
I
see,
wonder if it's like
it
the
smells
skunk though. It's like
good. And
dials
I
and
don't
stuff.
think it smells exactly like skunks either, like getting sprayed by an actual skunk. It smells strong and kind of noxious, but it's an attractive noxious
like
smell.
gas, like gas or
Yeah.
gasoline kind of smell.
I
Like
also
real
liked the smell of
gasoline does
gas as a
not.
kid.
I think I have to agree with Jack. I don't think it's so much. Well, yeah, I guess it's still acquired, but the thing is, it acquired love for it in that our sense of smell is tied so strongly to our memories, and that when you smoke something, we always smell stuff first, and we smell it as we burn it. And if you had a good experience with a flavor or I don't know if you want to call it anything other than a flavor, but if you had that scent at least, then it's burned in your memory that effect with that smell. So maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it also just has something to do with the stronger it smells, the higher it's going to get me. Even if it smells like sort of pungent or noxious or
Oh,
bad,
no matter
like
the smell, just
people
strength.
have this association with strong smells, strong high. And
I think that makes sense. Or like for
Yeah.
like even for like food stuff like spice, like piquancy, right? Or like if it has a strong aroma or there's a vinegar nature to it, I might feel like it's more potent in some way, and because it's potent in that smell. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's sort of an implied implication or whatever of potency when it's got a really strong smell. Even though the smell isn't sort of directly getting you high, you assume that there must be a lot of other things in there too, if there's a lot of things that smell.
Anticipation, yeah, I think.
Well, the second order, things like terpenes, thiols, esters are harder for the plant to produce. So ideally, if it produced a lot of them, the plant had a healthy or something went right for a long period of time in its life for that it to produce that, as well as the cannabinoids and other things that are going to make you feel the way that you want.
Sure. But I think this oftentimes with sort of like exotic colors in cannabis is that the breeders may have been chasing those colors or chasing that specific smell without paying as much attention to how sort of high it gets you. Every time they're doing a selection, they just select the smelliest one, not the one that gets you the highest. And when you're breeding like that, it's easy to select for one trait. It's very difficult to maintain everything else while you're selecting for that one trait. So I actually think there may be a lack of correlation, sort of like exotic colors or exotic smells may mean that all the attention went to those smells or those colors and not to the high.
Well, I agree, but I also like what you were saying, Jack, that like, even if it's not like like it's not like a super forethought, yeah, like if I get like a fruit or something and I smell it, and it's supposed to, if you can really smell the strawberry smell, or you can really smell the mango smell, I'm gonna feel like, oh, because aroma and flavor are so tightly linked, I'm gonna probably enjoy this. Maybe I don't, and there's substances out there that like have other effects, but they're not like very aromatic. Some are odorless and very bad for you, right? So, but yeah, that's like that's like the animal condition, right? And I think we've talked about it before, but like some might say that chemoreception and in this way like the perception of scent or molecules in that way and taste, it's like the first sense, right? Of like even unicellular life forms. So it's kind of abstract, but I like to think about that too.
Well, funny enough, the pigment that's responsible for making the plant purple, which a lot of people think is exotic, is considered a flavonoid. Anthocyanin is a flavonoid. So when people say like the purple flavor, like often it's accompanied by there's a ester methylanthranilate, which is smelling like artificial grape kind of flavoring or like grape candy. But there's other terpenes in there, linalols and things like that can be more floral, but the actual flavor that's imparted by anthocyanin itself is something. Like if you eat purple kale, if you eat purple grapes, if you eat purple whatever, it's mostly well, not most of the flavor, but some of that flavor is attributed by anthocyanin. So that purple flavor is kind of a thing.
Do you know what that is? Because I feel like flavonoid is like a super, like when people put molecules together in like chemical classes, sometimes it's due to their structure. I'm not a chemist, but like sometimes it's simply because they share a certain trait or they interact with a certain receptor, right? Like cannabinoid, for example. So I'm not sure if that's the case here, but I don't know. I would say that like I've had like purple carrots, for example, and things like that, where I do feel like there is a flavor that's there in the pigment. I don't know what that is. And anthocyanin has a lot of other neat little effects. Besides not only being like a physical structure that blocks light or things like this, or that are protective in another way, kind of like melanin. But I'd be curious to know more about that.
So some carrots are basically dyed purple by being fed purple water, and some carrots will produce sort of more anthocyanin and be naturally purple. But I find a lot of the, like, if you go and buy like the bag of rainbow colored carrots or whatever, they're just different carrots that have been dyed essentially in field, um, those different colors.
The purple anthocyanin is described itself as like when it's extracted as being astringent, bitter, and some people will say it can have a salty taste. So there are like three common descriptions that are given of that when it's purified and given. So,
Sounds
but
like something a pigment that's not very flavorful would taste like to me.
Well, I'll tell you what, I grew some purple potatoes last year and they were freaking amazing good. I loved them.
I
Yep.
do like me a purple potato or taro.
it's weird when you make purple
Oh,
mashed
taro
potatoes.
chips. Oh, taro chips are so good.
It's hard for my mind to wrap around when I had like purple mashed potatoes because I'm so used to,
Yeah.
not seeing them be purple. It's like when they have purple ketchup or whatever, it just fucked me up as a kid. And now I'm like, wait, are these supposed to be purple? Is that natural? And then when I know it is, it's like I can, take it down, but it's still a little bit for your mind when you've grown up with it being the same color your whole life and then you see the other one. It's like, what the fuck is that?
Mashed potatoes is an all-time favorite potato of mine. It's hard to beat the mashed potato other than a French fry, but and then a chip right there afterward. I mean, potatoes are amazing. I don't know why people aren't growing more potatoes. But a smashed potato, oh, I don't know if you've ever done those, but it's not mashed potatoes. It's just that you take the smaller, like redskin style potatoes that and you just smash them and then
Rice
bake,
potatoes.
bake them in the oven. Yeah. Oh, they get crispy on the outside. Oh, geez, they're so good.
Spartan's getting hungry.
Yes, I am.
We're like Bubba Gump shrimp, but for potatoes. You make potato chips, mashed potatoes, baked potatoes.
So do we feel comfortable saying that whatever that halitosis is, it's probably not just a terpene. It's probably some combination of terpenes and esters and flavonoids and they
Phenols,
came
whatever else.
together in that
Well,
in that strain.
scatol is what's responsible for pork and some bacon flavors and aromas being really nice, but you get too much of it in one place and well, it's
Yeah.
Smells like
associated with
shit.
other not yeah, it's associated with other things we don't like, right? So that's why proportionality is so important. Also, when we talk about like plants and when I talk about like biocontrols and how like the wasp will like seek out certain things, like those proportions of the compounds being made. It's not so simple as like plant makes X compound, wasp goes, oh, there's where my food is. Like sometimes if it gets too much or other compounds come in, they interfere. There's like this crazy cacophony, and it's interesting to consider that for like humans too, and how we perceive scent and flavor.
I think a lot of the time people are talking about body odor or bad breath. They're thinking about like, or when I follow up with them, they say like garlicky or oniony or, something like that. But what you're saying is, Doc, earlier, we were saying like on the more extreme end, I would say, of like the worst possible case breath. So it really just depends on what people are going for with that. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. The bad breath halitosis. Anybody else have more thoughts on that? Brandon or Tao, Noah, anybody want to weigh in further before we go maybe to our next question?
Has anybody grown a strain that they would describe that way?
No, but I was going to ask about Grandpa's breath. A strain called Grandpa's breath certainly would sound like it was a bit halitosis.
Yeah, I've heard talks of that. I think that's a cult classic maybe. Or who did that?
I think that's the layperson's word for halitosis is grandpa's breath.
It was definitely a popular strain for a little while.
All
Sounds
right,
like
so Rasunate in chat. I'm liking this. He's saying the hydrogen sulfide, the volatile sulfur compounds are what's behind a lot of these kind of smells, which makes sense. It's the same things with the skunks and stuff like that. Major contributors to bad breath: hydrogen sulfide, methyl, marsapath. I can't say all these. Mercaptan and to a
mercaptan, yeah.
lesser extent, dimethyl sulfite represent 90%. Thank you for that information. That makes a
That's
lot.
in
Makes a
skunk
lot of
spray
sense.
too, that mercaptan. Some of that's responsible for the odor in skunk spray and dead skunk. The Jeffro for 2069 has a good question. They asked earlier, uh, soil mites, good, bad. If I see a lot, should I worry? They're on the plastic pots, top of the soil, and the floor. Nothing on the plants. Fingers crossed. I feel like this is going to be we need more information or photos type thing, but I'll pass it to Matthew. See if you have any thoughts.
I said the same thing. I did just respond to it like a lot of people, they encounter these like mold mites or soil predatory mites, or sometimes they're omnivorous. Lelapidae, Phytoseidae, all these families, you're not really going to be able to tell what exactly the species is just from a visual. Maybe you can get sort of a body plan intuition somewhat, and I feel like I've developed that pretty good. But even I know that a lot of times they'll be identical to each other essentially. You won't be able to tell from like a camera phone picture or something like that. But if they are one of those two that are very commonly encountered, the mold mites probably aren't a huge issue. Sometimes they can get really big. We get this question all the time. Population expands because moisture is higher, or there's a lot of free organic matter in the substrate. Um, they're not really like they're not going to be a huge problem unless your plants aren't hardened off. So like germinating seedlings might be susceptible. Also, if you get like a wound or if there's like a pathogen attack, especially like close to the soil surface or below it, like in the roots, then you might not see it, but actually they're exacerbating that problem because there's a bunch of decaying organic matter, right? So they're not like a problem by themselves, but they can exacerbate a problem potentially. And then for the predatory mites that, or omnivorous mites that are like, they're typically a lot more quicker. They've got like kind of a teardrop shape and they raise their legs up a lot of times, the front two. I had somebody just contact me recently. They thought they were aphids and they're like, well, they don't have eight legs, but I showed them the video that they don't have antennae. Those are just their legs that they're using kind of like them. So that can throw people off sometimes. Sometimes they mistake them for rice root aphids because they've heard about them but never experienced them. So that's another thing I wanted to mention too. But generally, I don't think it's a huge problem, especially if the population is pretty minor, which I would define as like you just see a few here or there. If you see like hundreds of them all congregated in one place, you might want to check out like is that there's like something die like there, or is there something like is there like a mass of like some compost that you might have applied or something? Because if you do compost and that kind of thing, there are oftentimes they're doing that bioturbation there for you. So they're some might say a valuable contributor to that um, process, but people aren't familiar with the weird creepy crawlies in their compost, so it can cause some concern, which is understandable.
That's well answered. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I've had some what I think I identified as red orb mites in my earthworm casting bin a couple times, and they just ramped up population. It was unreal how many there were. And yeah, I read a
Sounds like
couple things.
erybatid mites, but yeah, the
Yeah, they
erybathids are
weren't
really common too. Yeah,
they say
good
when they
point.
get overwhelming, they do harm to the eco, like the earthworm casting thing, and they say try and get rid of it, try and lessen the numbers. And pretty much what a couple recipes where you put a wet piece of burlap on top of your earthworm casting bin, and they'll overtake that. They just take out the burlap and throw it out, and that should reduce the numbers enough, and then not keep it as moist. But I didn't see it wasn't like detrimental and killed them all off. So, but I think that's like a lot to do with the environment. It was wet, and they had the perfect environment, just with nobody else bothering them.
Be careful of red mites in your worm bin too. I don't know the exact name, but there are some red mites that will actually kill your worms eventually if
That
given a
is true.
big enough population. So definitely keep an eye. If you get the red mites, that's something to be a little
Yeah,
wary of.
definitely. I'll see. I think I have footage of them somewhere. I'll see if I can find it just for all of it.
We're getting some feedback that it's been extremely humid in the past 4 days for them. Who asked the question about the mites and that their soil could be too moist, maybe. Now, too moist, I don't know. Like, I want to be very careful. Like, for example, I know a lot of people who grow in a very sort of organic minded or amendment focused substrate or like a living soil substrate, and maybe they like the idea, but they've never encountered some of the helpers that are going to be commonplace when you're applying a bunch of like dead organic matter to the substrate. So I
Smart.
don't want to say that if you have like that and there's a lot of like moisture retention, that's good for the plants. I don't know if it's like I wouldn't say it's over wet. Sorry, don't mean to like really needle this too moist word, but I think that's important because that's like the number one and number two problem people have with growing. Like they either don't water enough or they water too much. So I
Absolutely.
wanted to bring that up. And then they say that they use compost as a top dressing, so
And
it
that's
sort of
the
fits. It sort of
yeah.
fits the what I said, right? So I think that's possibly what's happening, but not necessarily bad. Not necessarily bad at all.
Right. And the compost is probably the source of them. That's probably the source of where the mites are coming from.
I had somebody ask me recently, just today. They showed me a picture of a beetle, and they were able to isolate it for me, which was helpful. But basically, it looked like these beetles I encountered like 9 years ago working with the Gerbera daisies, where we had nitidulids. That's what they're called, nitidulidae. They're the pleasing sap-feeding beetles. But what was weird is that they're usually infecting fruits when they get overripe. You know, they'll just get in there and they're attracted to the aromatic compounds, right? The alcohols and things that are produced by fermentation. But what was weird was that for flowers, we don't have any of that. But when we cut the stems, I think I've told this story a few times, they got attracted to the sugary juices coming out of the cut stem. And then they transmitted some pathogens. So weird stuff can happen like that. But this was just in his compost. He had just put fruits in his compost. I'm like, well, then there's probably not a huge problem. But sometimes weird idiosyncratic things can happen too. So I don't want to give people like I want to give as much context as possible without going overboard. So that'll be it.
Any questions on your mind? I know Tao has questions just always ready and waiting. Like
Uh, oh, now that you put me on the spot, I don't really. Let me take a couple seconds.
looks like we got Jeffro 420 saying thank
No,
you
it's
for
cool. I
answering
can
the question.
dominate the conversation more. It's no problem, Jack. You need only ask. Oh, here's one. Chiba Man asks, will tea tree and peppermint castile soap, hydrogen peroxide, and alcohol spray kill spider mites, thrips, and other soft shell insects? Insect on a soft shell, huh? That's a TMNT reference.
Wow, that's fucking awesome, man.
Um,
That's a good one, man.
insects on a half shell.
That's right.
Um,
Soft
let's
donkey
see.
head
Well, yeah,
skin.
these things can be pretty deleterious to a lot of insects and mites and things.
The
Not
thing
sure I would
here,
recommend using them though, always.
and
A
the thing here too
tea tree
is like how
sometimes.
much, right?
Yeah,
That's a big thing we don't know here in this
the
question
big
is
qualifier. I mean, hydrogen peroxide can sometimes it does nothing. I don't. I think a lot of people ask me about peroxide, and I don't. Or like peracetic acid, and those could be helpful for some pathogens or some like fungi and microbials. But insects and mice can be made of stronger stuff. Alcohol is pretty lethal to a lot of things. And some of these Castile soaps and other similar products, like they can also be hazardous um, to the health of like things like spider mice and thrips and that. It's hard though. Like thrips are a real nightmare for a lot of people because they move so easily. So if you've got like tons of them and you got lots of plants, maybe more than like 10, it can be a little bit hard to like get to nab all of them, I think, with the spray. But what do other people think?
Well, I could testify that hydrogen peroxide does not kill spider mites because I doused a leaf with had spider mites on it with straight up store bought, only that like 3% hydrogen peroxide, and it didn't phase them at all. Because I watched it for like a day, and yeah, they did not die. They were unaffected as far as I could tell.
Yeah, and so maybe there are like different concentrations of things that people can get or maybe not easily get. Um, but yeah, I agree. I feel like people are usually thinking of like the peroxide they get at like a store or something, and yeah, I don't think so. If only they could be so easily taken care of, right? We wouldn't have some of the problems we have in the agricultural world, maybe.
It sounds like this is a product or some sort of protocol that
It
Chiba
does.
has seen or heard that's making this claim, like this product will kill spider mites, thrifts, and all other soft shell insects, and like the ingredients are tea tree oil and peppermint oil and whatever. Yeah, I'm curious if this is really a product or a protocol or something, but it does sound like that. And so you're kind of throwing some cold water on this, Matthew. You don't think
It does sound like a product potentially.
Yeah.
I feel like some of the components might work against some of the I wouldn't say soft shell, soft bodied insects are things like, it's kind of a nebulous term, but it's like things like thrips, mealybugs, aphids, insects that don't have like a super hard chitinous body. Something that wouldn't be a soft body would be like a beetle, maybe. Or, I mean, not really an issue, but like hornets and things have a pretty sclerotized body, a pretty hard body. If it crunches, when you bite into it, it's probably
I think the most common thing you'll see in a
probably
grow is
hard
maybe a
body.
rove beetle would be that, right?
But yeah, rove beetles. Well, rove beetles are very unique for beetles because they have a much more lithe,
Yeah, they're kind of more.
flexible carapace. Yeah. But yes, that's actually a good point. That's a great point, actually, because most people interact with rove beetles on this channel if they're in cultivation. So some of those insects, like their cuticle is very soft, and that does make them susceptible to some things, certainly. Some of these things that are like desiccants or suffocants, or maybe they will somehow like melt through the chitinous cuticle and the waxy cuticle. Yeah.
Depending on the pest too. You can look for the. I like what Matthew does, and he breaks it down. Like, how is it killing? What's the mode of action? How exactly is this thing killing? Because then you can start mixing things, right? That are different modes of action to get you higher success. So we'll say thrips, because I think that's one of them that was brought up. If you know that whatever maybe this is a product, if you know that's somewhat effective but not 100% effective, maybe you hit them with that first, and then you come in with maybe a biocontrol, or you come in with maybe something like fungus, and hit them with like a 1-2 punch rather than just a one punch.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that is like the best takeaway for IPM is try to have a system that attacks all the life stages if you can, and try to have multiple things that do different things doing it, and you can stay ahead of the power curve. That's the thesis statement. But that does mean that you have to be a little bit redundant, which means it's going to be a little bit more costly, maybe, to do that. So that is somewhat of a trade-off, but I mean, the alternative is all the resistance problems that we've seen in the last like 50 years in like large-scale ag. So yeah.
All right. Well, I think we answered that one well. We've got another one from Lone Star Larf, who says, at Cheap Home Grow, ever topped a plant in flower? Had to do it, so I guess I'll see what happens.
I asked a follow-up question. I don't think you answered. Like, how deep into flower are we?
That was my first question too.
Are the plants still bolting? I mean, are the plants still growing, or have they stopped growing at this point? I imagine they're still growing, because that's why you're topping, probably, is because the plant got too big on you. So it won't be the end of the world at all if the plant's still growing, would be my opinion. It's probably not going to help yield much, but the plant will recover.
I agree. I don't do it often, but I have in the past. If it grew into the light or something, I'll just cut that down. Why let the plant even send any more resources to something I'm not probably going to keep, or it's not going to be great? So I'll just cut it down. But I don't do that very often. I've got it down now to where my stuff doesn't jump up too high. Well, maybe this year I'm going to plant some hazes, and that might be an issue. But it's not ideal. I think we can all agree that it's not something ideal. You want to have all your, especially toppings, done before you get into flower. I might clean up some bottom stuff in flower, but I'm not
think
taking
they just
tops.
said 5 weeks into flower.
That's rough. That's after it's stretched usually, unless it's a really.
That's definitely, yeah. I'm curious, Lone Star, why did you need to top
2+
at that
still
point?
lights, buds would have grown into them. Yeah, rather than dimming the light, he just cut them.
Okay, but the plant probably stopped growing a couple weeks ago. Um, so you just did. I'm curious
Cut
what was
back,
happening. Were you
basically.
trying to make things work for a couple of weeks and finally just decided to chop it back? But it usually happens when the plants are still growing. I would say, it's not going to increase your yield. Oftentimes when we top really early, like the plant grows two tops where it used to only have one, like that's not going to happen. It's just going to be a slightly shorter plant. And it's probably not going to produce a lot on that cola that you top.
Certainly late in flower and not the ideal SOP. I think this is probably out of desperation, it seems like. And like they said, we'll see what's going to happen. And they're going to find out. I've overgrown my space and had to chop stuff back. I wouldn't necessarily consider what I was doing topping. It was more like removing stuff that was getting burnt up by the light. So I was chopping it back to a more reasonable distance away because the light had gotten pinned up as high as it possibly could go. And the plant was just growing itself into a position where it was too close, and there was no more bending and training that I could do at that point. So it was just chopping off, and it got to a point where I had just like maybe a top quarter inch of like the buds in that section were a little bit white, but everything underneath it was fine, and everything around it was fine. It was just I had too much light for my little space at that time. So things happen. It doesn't mean that the whole grow is like a loss. There's probably going to be plenty of good bud that wasn't directly next to or under the light. So don't let it discourage you. It's a learning experience, and try and maybe potentially plan for how much a strain like whatever you are growing can stretch. For me, it was Blue Dream and over vegging and growing in cocoa after, growing kind of Afghanis and shorter squat stuff for a long time that didn't stretch quite that much. So it was a learning experience, but we all go through our trials and tribulations as growers. And I think that's what makes it fun. Everybody has a little bit unique, different challenge depending on their grows and experience. So just keep on trucking. Don't let it bring you down. Anybody else have more thoughts on that topping week 5 in flower? Noah the girl, you ever top in flower?
Yeah, I have. Well, you know what? No, not top, but I've done stuff just very similar to what you were saying. You know what I mean? Like, I actually one time was in a situation just like that. It was actually a Gorilla Glue plant, same thing. My bedroom, I was packing. This is when I was growing 5,000 watts at the time, and I just was this actually on the show, and Doc was talking about like super cropping and breaking it, and I just broke it, and I didn't notice any adverse effects. It just and so I have messed around with that. You know what I mean? Like, so, but now one of the things I do is my net's pretty high, and if I put plants in that are small, what I'll do is I'll like either take like those dishes you get to like kind of catch runoff, I'll turn them upside down and kind of prop them up, or just put a 5 gallon and prop it up. And then as I go, as the plant will stretch even in flower, I'll start removing it or lowering it. I've actually been doing that since I've been on the show. I'm working in my room right now, and I'm adjusting. My net is pretty hilarious. It's like pushed up from all my plants. So yeah, you just experiment. You know what I mean? Like you said, it's you're growing, you're learning. You know what I mean? You're having fun, and most likely you're not going to cause any damage. So if someone topping though, week 5, I don't think I would do it. But hey, you try it on a plant. It's not like it's gonna, like you said, it's not gonna really mess anything up. I wouldn't think, but for me, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah,
All right.
it's not gonna destroy your grow, and you'll have a good idea now because I think he has done it. This is Lone Star Larf, right? I think he has done it, and pay attention to the plant. Check it out when you're harvesting. You'll sort of and compare that to how you think the plant would have grown if you hadn't done the topping or if you'd done some other form of training. But I mean, it's certainly not going to ruin everything. Don't let us get you freaked out.
That's the beautiful thing about bro science. Like back in the day, like there wasn't a lot of things like this. I mean, I had the Horus Aventus Marijuana Bible and certain things, and I'd look up on forums and stuff. But you basically, if you had homies, that were growing, you could talk to them and ask from their experiences. But you just kind of learn by trial and error. And
Yeah.
I always just like I would never do that to my whole grow. Like anybody who's ever done something that they wish they hadn't done to like a whole crop can attest to just try it out on one, and then maybe implement it in your grow next time. And I have stumbled upon things that I implement in my grow, but surprisingly, I've stumbled upon quite a few more that I eliminated. So
Tried once and left it by the wayside. Fooled me once, right? But
yeah,
it's well, I like the idea of trying it on one plant. I saw something a while back on the forums called like backbuilding your buds, where people were like not liking their buds looking so triangle tipped. So they're cutting off
Excellent.
in late
Yeah.
flower the tips of the buds, thinking that it would make the buds swell out and be more like rounded. And I think, yeah,
Some
I think it's a
people say it
misunderstanding of a few
happens.
things.
True.
Well, I think it's a few things. One, maybe not appreciating a genetic that is not the densest calyx structure, which I think is fine. That's just one part of the conversation. The other thing is, I think a lot of the time people that are looking for that rounded bud are maybe thinking of like the end product, which might be machine trimmed and like a rounded ball, where it's not necessarily what it looks like on the plant, but they're maybe a newer grower and thinking like, oh, I want it to look like the end product while it's on the live plant. So they're gonna like trim it up with essentially to make it look like nugs on a stick. And so there's that element of it as well. But it could be that legitimately there are things like out of whack, like if it's too hot and your stuff's all foxtailed and you're trying to like shape the bud because you're thinking it's looking a little bit too loose or airy, but I think at that point, you're probably not going to do too much good for yourself and trying to rescue it with some secret tech that you saw on a forum. But it's like Noah said, you try a bunch and you probably pull a few good ones. There is some cool stuff that does work. And, everybody's situation, you just got to try and figure out what works for you.
this whole conversation, I'm kind of a curious guy. It's made me think. I wonder how many growers out there have techniques that I wish I knew. Have techniques that they just figured out on their own. They've never told anybody either. Hey, like you know what I mean? Like they want to keep it to themselves, or maybe they didn't just don't even think it's like something important. But little tricks that they might have that would like just change my grow room. Because I mean, I've done certain things and found certain things from other growers that have changed my grow room. So I'm just wondering if like it's obviously not really the right answer for that question, but I'm just curious what you guys think. Is there other people out there like there's got to be ninja growers that know stuff that we don't know? Because I know there's guys that know stuff that I don't know. There's got to be There's got to be levels. There's levels to everything. You know what I mean? Like,
I think there's tips and tricks that people have, or specific procedures or ways of doing things that are easier or simplified or other things like that. And I try to share
totally.
those. We try to create, spaces for other people to share those. But I don't think there's some sort of magic horticulture knowledge that like some grower just sort of figured out on their own and nobody else knows. I don't think there's some like secret ways that plants grow that like I am the only one that know, or some guy or woman or whatever is the only one that knows. I'm really less skeptical about that, but certainly people have better ways of doing things and little tips and tricks about how to do them that are pretty damn convenient sometimes when you learn them.
Oh yeah, well then that's what I'd want to know, And like you said, I
Yeah.
mean, I doubt that, like you said, there's no guy that knows, like, hey, if I like transplant my plant in from veg, like week 3, like I'm going to experience a 20% more yield at the end. Yeah, I highly doubt anything like
Right.
that
Or
significant.
if I
Of
give them a
course,
specific
but
product that I'll sell you for $59.99 at this time, then it'll, produce some specific result, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah,
For
I
me,
don't.
it's more like wheels on planters and like those
Yeah,
little things that like mechanics work
totally.
on underneath cars where you can like slide around, or even just like a little stool with wheels on it while you're like in
Oh,
the garden.
bro, I've gone through 3 of those. So, but if you have a big grow room and you have a concrete floor or something, yeah, don't hesitate on pulling the trigger on that. So I'll just say that one right now.
Yeah. And the little stools that you can sit on as you're defoliating your plants, those are nice too. But I would say, I hesitate to say a little bit, but no, that's my secret, man. That's my super secret. That's why I love doing all these shows, because I still to this day I'll be doing a show and I'm learning from another grower. I'm learning a trick, like you're saying, or another way to do something or something. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Those are perfect.
yeah. I will absolutely, and I think we all do here, share our secrets, right? Like you figure out something that works. It's like, I just want to tell everybody, like, hey, try this. This is an easier way to do this thing that we all have to do.
We are not gatekeeping the secrets.
No,
I'm
definitely
trying to
not.
like be
No.
the only one that knows it, so like I can succeed better than you can or something. That's what I don't like about competitive spaces where people are trying to win by holding their secrets to themselves or whatever.
Never
I
tell
think so.
them
What Noah was
everything.
saying though is like some of it is just like unspoken things that people don't pick up. Like I think even I just brought
Yeah.
up that stool thing because like a lot of people don't think it is a labor. Like when you start doing gardening at any significant scale, like there's a lot of physical work. So being able to sit down, get off your feet and slide around while you're doing some of that work is gonna make you able to work longer and with less physical pain on your feet. And maybe even see it from a better angle than you would if you were standing up and like hunched over trying to, or even like squatting down. You're not going to be in the ideal location.
But
So
you don't need to like buy the like green, like marijuana leaf on the
cannabis
seat,
stool,
yeah, the cannabis stool
cannabis
2000.
420,000.
Yeah, the 420, yeah. The
Yeah.
deluxe 420 grower stool with like places you can put your pen and your notepad, like you didn't already have pockets or anything like that. I mean, sometimes you
this
can't have
seriously,
pockets.
let me just say this right now, because this comes up so often, is growers that grow hydroponically think they need to buy cannabis specific nutrients, or like this is nutrients from like Humboldt County, or this is like got some deep like cannabis lore history to it, and I think that is just a way to charge more for nutrients. So specifically that's one area where it comes up a lot. You don't need any kind of cannabis specific nutrients in order to grow your plant.
I think the worst I ever came across was somebody who was selling a substrate. It was like a soil mix or something, but they used a lot of the like sort of electroculture or universe like terminology to kind of like boost it and build up. But what they mixed into it were semi-precious stones, with the logic being that maybe you don't, but I'm in this space enough and I encounter enough people who say things like the lattice work, the intricate molecular, lattice of the semi-precious stones have an effect on the plant health or something like this, or it'll ground it, or I don't
Can
know,
you
have
prove
these
that it
sort of
doesn't,
like
bro?
esoteric effects. What?
I said, can
Hmm?
you prove that it doesn't, bro?
Yeah, I know exactly. Who am I to say that it doesn't work? But I think that I don't know. I mean,
I
yeah.
actually had a
Semi-precious, we got to be
good
making it
buddy.
with.
I had
Go
a good
ahead, Noah.
buddy try and get me to do that. Gave me an
Oh,
actual
really? What I
crystal.
just
Oh
said.
yeah, oh
Okay,
yeah,
so I'm not
oh
the only
yeah.
one. I'm not the only one. I
And
feel better
was
now.
like, hey, I seen online, if you take this particular crystal, when you clone it and you put it in the actual plant, it's gonna make a huge difference. And like, I was just like, okay, whatever, and put the thing in my drawer. And like 6 months later, they were like, hey, how did that work out? And I like, was kind of embarrassed. I didn't try it, you know what I mean? So I don't know, but yeah, I was skeptical myself.
This was
I
like
think
bits of like I want to say like garnet and I think there are even some like low grade rubies and things in there too, if you can believe it.
It's
But they
like
were
23
charging like an
precious
exorbitant amount of money for
gemstones.
it. So
well, everybody knows only high grade rubies work for horticulture, Matthew. So if they're using the low
absolutely.
grade rubies and just semi precious stones, I mean, there's no diamonds in there. Come on.
You need 10,000, well, you need 10,000 gold pieces and a large diamond to be able to cast Resurrection. And honestly, after the economy went down, you can't find that anymore. It doesn't matter if you're a sixth or an eighth level wizard, it's just not there. You have to go fight a lich or something, and I don't have time for that. So I don't know.
Anything with
Not for the plants,
Dude.
anyways.
anything with these stones in it, it's from like shavings from jewelers, like the waste material, like when they're like cutting stuff,
Exactly.
there's a little left over in like the little runoff water and all that. Well, they will sell that to people like this person who is selling the magical water that makes you yield 20% more, like we were talking about earlier, like with that product type language that you'll probably see associated with such product type claims.
Yeah.
I have a product I have to ask folks about because I feel like one of those old men saying, "What are you doing? This is, and not even because I don't even want to give it a chance, kind of a thing." And it's been brought to my attention a couple of times, and it's a device, this plastic device. That's another thing that irritates me, but it's a plastic device that that's designed to make the perfect environment for your seeds to germinate in. And I'm thinking, isn't that called soil? What the fuck? And and I don't know. I haven't even looked much more into it, just other than the concept of them pitching it to me or whatever.
It's
And
like a seed sprouter.
yeah, but it's like, is there a sudden need for that? Is there really issues with germinating seeds where that people have a hard time germinating seeds now? Because
I read in
I've had old seeds, new seeds, whatever. They all seem to germinate fine.
there's so many ways to do it too. Like DJ Short wrote in his book about there's this one that he got it in like a cereal box toy. It was just like a sponge that basically got soaked with a little bit of water, and you put your seed in there, and it would germinate all types of different seeds. And it had like a little globe type top, and it would just snap shut. It's like a little plastic half clamshell type thing with basically a sponge that folded over the seed and kept it moist for it to sprout. And so there's a million and one different ways of doing it. Keep it damp for that first few days and get it sprouted and then into a good media. But it sometimes can be for new growers one of the more difficult parts, especially if they maybe didn't get good viable seed. Maybe it's not them, maybe it's the seed, but maybe it is their technique. So I think that the rapid rooters or root riots or peat cubes,
Yeah, I like those. Those are
all
good.
pretty simple. Soak it and let any excess drip off. Pop your seed in there and leave it be for a few days and let it sprout. It can be easy to overcomplicate it.
I just didn't know. I mean, I've seen it a couple times now. It seems like it's getting more and more popular. And I just was like, I wasn't aware that there was a huge issue with people being able to pop seeds. I haven't had people like reach out to me saying, "Hey, how do you pop
Oh, yeah.
seeds?" I'm not getting any good seed results when I pop them. I'm throwing 10 seeds and I'm not getting any of them. I'm not hearing people even saying that.
My germination video is by far my most popular video on YouTube.
Well, I would understand beginners. You know what I mean? The
I think
first thing
people
you want
don't
to look
share
at
their
is that.
losses,
Yeah.
and people are afraid to like admit like, oh, if I didn't germinate my seeds, somehow I'm a bad grower or I did something wrong.
Okay.
So they're not going to go out and be like, I got a 1 out of 10 germ rate from this big trusted vetted breeder that everybody talks so highly of. Like maybe I fucked up, maybe I'm the reason, and they don't want to necessarily admit it in public, but it can happen. Like maybe you got them too hot, like you have
I
one
think
of
a lot of
those.
times people give up on them too early too. I'll set them and forget it and just leave them there and just keep
And
them.
sometimes people make mistakes. They try to germinate in fertilizer water when they're growing hydroponically, or they don't protect the radicle from light, and so they put it under a light, and it gets sort of stunted that way. Or it dries out, or like Jack said, it gets too hot. There's a lot of different ways that you can screw this up, and then you might have had 2, 3, 4 good grows, and then you start having problems because you're not paying attention to something like what kind of water you're using, and you start having a lot of issues. So yeah, I do think,
And cheap equipment sometimes gets out of whack. So like maybe you had a
yeah,
sensor or a probe that like I hate to say it, we bought this is the cheap home grow a lot of us buy at the lowest common denominator. You got that thing on Amazon from whatever company and maybe it worked for the first, 100 days, but after 3 months or 4 months or whatever, it doesn't necessarily work as advertised. So that heat mat that was supposed to be 70 or 80 is now 100 degrees and you're just cooking everything. But because you didn't like temp gun that little seedling mat, it's 20 degrees hotter than you'd ever thought. And then maybe you touch it with your hand, you're like, oh shit, this is scorching. Of course, yeah, all my seeds are getting cooked, but it's a bummer one at $10 a seed plus for a lot of the known breeders. You're losing, a decent chunk of money if you popped 5 or 10 seeds and none of them went because for some reason like things got out of whack just at one time.
Yeah,
So it
that's
can be
why
a
they're
big gut
selling that.
punch.
That's why they're selling that thing, Spartan, because someone just wasted $100 and failed once, and they're ready to spend $100 to make sure they don't lose another 100.
Man,
You're not
that's
wrong.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and yeah. Once
just
that's the other thing. Once you screw up the starts, if you over dry them once they're dead, they're dead. You
if you
can't bring
pay.
them back. You can bring back a fucked up, 2 foot of plant and make it get healthy again, but you can't do that with a seedling.
It's easy to second guess yourself and get into your head even after just one failed attempt. Like,
I'm
oh
just
Yeah.
man.
old school, man. I'm like, well, then fix what you're doing. Don't buy a crutch.
Well, that's what they're trying to do.
Right.
They're trying to fix what they're doing by buying everything. Like that's
I think
like
sometimes there's an
everything.
element like if maybe they know, oh, I'm gonna be away from the grow for too long, I need something that can keep it at the ideal moisture or something like
Or
that,
just
where
something
I'm not
make
gonna
it
be able to
easily
check in.
consistent. Yeah,
But
it might
like
be a good thing,
a
right?
Ziploc baggie and a
There you
wet
go.
paper
The wet paper
towel
towel.
is a cheap, simple way. You can let them stand there for like 48 to 72 hours. Almost every single time I have 95 to 100% germination when I've done that. And then you can just pop them into whatever media you're going into. At that point, they're basically like, anywhere from 1 to 2 or 3 inches long, depending on how vigorous that seed is. And a lot of the time, you can even just remove the little seedling shell at that point, and they're off to the races. So, I mean, there's a lot of different approaches that you can take, and I think everybody sort of stumbles into which one works for them, but it's worth trying a few different ways and maybe not investing 100 or 50 or whatever dollars in a device because maybe it is as simple as just, hey, I'm gonna get some seed starter mix, I'm gonna pop it in the soil, and then, you know, moisten it and see how it
Sure.
goes. When I did that
There you go.
100%. Same with the little rapid rooters or root riot cubes.
Jiffy
They're pretty
pellets.
much 100% Jiffy pellets. Yeah. I mean, if you just let it do its thing, most of the time
And
it'll
yeah,
work.
those cotyledons are actually like nutrients for the thing, at the first 14 days or whatever. And when you see them get used up, definitely start the nutrients. But supposedly the nutrients aren't necessary for the first like 10 days at least, right? Or am I wrong? I could be wrong.
No, I think you
What
don't
what did you
need,
say? I'm
he's
sorry.
saying that you don't
About
need
the
nutrients
cotyledons, how
early.
the seeds have
No,
nutrition.
that's wrong. They
All
don't
right,
have
you see?
nutrients. They don't have NPK, what plants need in order to do photosynthesis. They have carbohydrates. So the seed has carbohydrates that it will use for energy until it can start photosynthesizing. But in order to photosynthesize, it needs to open its leaves and have access to NPK. And it doesn't come with any NPK. So if you don't give it any access to NPK, then it will not be able to photosynthesize until you do, even if the leaves are.
What's in the cotyledons? I thought that was like I didn't know if it was NPK. What are you saying? Just like carbohydrates in that,
Yeah,
or
it's
nothing? Yeah.
carbohydrates. It's basically food for the plant to respire into energy in order to grow as a seed and in order to start coming up. But basically, plants in photosynthesis, there's two places where plants can kind of get food. They're born with some food. The seed carries some carbohydrates in it, and then they can make their own food through photosynthesis. They need to respire that food to break it down and digest it basically to create energy for themselves to do everything else. And so they're always doing that respiration their whole life, even during photosynthesis. But at first, they're only doing that sort of respiration. They're consuming this small bit of calories, basically, that were packed into the seed with them. And we need to create conditions where they can start photosynthesizing before they run out of those carbohydrates. And again, in order to photosynthesize, plants have to have access to NPK. They don't come with any sort of, and that's why calling them nutrients is sometimes problematic because you think of it as nutrition. They have nutrition, but they don't have those mineral element nutrients that are required as in order to actually conduct photosynthesis.
So there's carbohydrates. Are there like enzymes or hormones or anything
There
else
you
in
go.
the seedling
Yeah,
early?
no, there absolutely are enzymes and hormones and other things like that. But the carbohydrates are their primary source. There's also some proteins, but the carbohydrates are the main source of energy for the plant until it can start photosynthesizing.
Well, it actually leads
That
really
we
well into Minnesota grower. We were talking about NPK, and the seeds don't actually have it. Like if you crushed them up and tested it for NPK, you're not going to get that, right? So this goes kind of not directly, but indirectly into Minnesota growers' question, which says, do you guys taper the NPK change at the flip, or do you just flip immediately to bloom? I can't stick around, but thanks. We'll listen to the podcast. So cheers to you, Minnesota grower, and I'll pass that to Doc first.
Yeah, I walk them into 12-12, so I don't flip anything immediately. I reduce the lights on time by, or increase the lights off time by 2 hours a day until they get to 12-12. And during that, walking into 12-12 and the first like 5-6 days of 12-12, I give them a transition blend of nutrients, which is a lower EC, not much lower, but a little bit lower EC. And a little bit higher on the ratio of PK. So a slightly lower ratio of N in order to basically accomplish that. I also drop the Cal Mag in that blend to create sort of the EC space and to keep that number down. But it's all gradual, and it's sort of an intermediate step between late veg bloom mix and early bloom mix. If that helps. I think this is specifically a hydro question, so I don't know if other people wanted to chime in on that specifically.
I can just say I've done that. I've done where I've switched it right from veg to flower, and they were fine. They seemed fine, and they just chugged right along. So I don't think there's any danger in doing so. And but also you can do it where you walk it into it as well, and I don't see any ill effects of that as well. So I think it's kind of up to your choice, which you like to do as a grower, what works in your schedule.
Many of the lines, NERs, are not that different from veg to flower. They're just, selling you two different bottles with two different labels, but really they're very close, maybe minor changes from, A and B and veg to A and B and flower. But like Jack's 321, a lot of the stuff is very similar with minor
The biggest
changes.
difference is really the increase in the PK. The N
Does any
basically
nutrient
stays the same throughout the grow.
do any nutrient companies recommend starting like with flower nutrients like a week before you stick them into flower? Because I heard of that like back in the day.
No, I
Nah.
specifically don't recommend that. I think we should follow the plants with nutrition, not try to lead them.
I agree with Doc and
But they
Kyle. I
also
think that's
can,
a hydro store sales tactic
yeah,
back in the
sales
day.
thing. But
Hey,
let me
hit him
ask
with
you
that
this, Doc,
nutrient.
right? But the plants can store some nutrients in their cells, right, for use later on.
There's not going to be an
That's front
uptake.
loading.
Not really, Tao. They're going to take them up as they need them, particularly PK.
Right. I guess I
there's
heard
no,
that about
in a
calcium,
hydroponic
maybe.
sense, there's no reason to have to put those in early, that you can get
Right.
when you're fertigating.
They're
Loading the
immediately
soil
available
up is
anyway.
different than the
Yeah.
plant, though.
Yeah, exactly. If you're amending soil, you have to come out this problem.
Well, that's yeah.
So yeah, I think like Doc was
2 weeks.
talking about it from a hydroponic standpoint,
Yeah,
where I think like when
no
you hear
doubt.
maybe like Brandon or I or Spartan talk about when we're amending our soil, we're charging it, we're giving it plenty of nutrients so that they're there when the plant will request them when it needs certain things throughout the grow. And so
Right.
it's a little bit of a difference in philosophy.
And
But
in that case, Jack, the nutrients are basically going to sit in the soil until the plant starts calling on them. It's not that the plant's going to start absorbing
exactly.
them and like store them in the plant until the plant needs to use them. That really doesn't
100%.
happen. I mean, the plant's going to take the nutrients it needs at that time and use them.
I totally agree. It's just I think sometimes we like to think about the plant having these abilities of
Yeah.
being extra magical and powerful and special in certain ways. And or I think we
Well, it's
just
how
have misunderstandings.
it's how we work. It's how our bodies work.
Yeah, we're anthropomorphizing the plant a bit,
Yeah.
Right.
which is
Right.
easy
I
to
also
do.
I think it's really important to understand, as you're talking about, Jack, the difference between fertigating or growing hydroponically versus amending media and delivering your nutrients that way. Really different sort of protocols, and you do things at different times.
Very true. And I used to grow in cocoa, and I did have a AB and like flour, and I felt like when I was using that product line, I was best off doing kind of like what Doc was saying, is following the plant with the nutrients. When I'd see the buds start to form, that's when I'd give it more of the flower nutrient, so to speak. And during the veg, it just needed that veg nutrient. It was just fine. It wasn't ever looking like it was lacking. So I just think,
Brandon, I'm sorry.
no,
I
go
was
ahead. I
gonna
was just
say,
rambling.
Brandon, I saw your plant that you have in the cocoa, I guess on IG today, man. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I actually harvested last night.
That thing was
Uh,
frosty, dude.
yeah, it's part of an ongoing project. I'll be doing more cocoa, but that was just a gallon pot. I can show you guys. I just got into my flower room. Hold on, let me turn my camera on.
Hell yeah.
We'll check it out, and then I'm gonna send a link live after we do one more question. I forgot. It's already 5:05.
So
He got sucked into the
The
Faraday
void
cage.
got him.
Looks like it.
Wow, I thought it was me for a second.
Got too close to a bulbinate
Okay.
ballast or something.
Oh, I see a plant now. I see you. I see you, Brandon.
Now it's coming back.
Okay, so I had to turn my
Oh.
Wi-Fi off because I'm out in the garden. So what ended up happening was I didn't have enough cocoa to fill up the whole 2 gallon pot. So what I ended up doing was I had enough cocoa to just put some at the bottom there, and then I just put the 1 gallons directly in here. And I just let them run their thing. And I only actually fertilized once every other week. I didn't pH anything, and the way that it worked was, well, my little thing broke here, but I have the Autopots, and it just feeds these systems like a bottom feeding wicking system here. And yeah, I mean, I didn't do anything except put water in here with microbes, and then I just top fed the cocoa with the humate. And so there's the cool thing about the humate is there's no precipitation reactions with it. And there's you don't have to pH anything. It allows for passive transport because the plant isn't taking up ions. It's taking up the nutrients as an organic molecule. But it was a cool experiment. I'm gonna keep doing more. I'm gonna do the full 2.5 gallons on these things and run them back.
Are you going to do any changes on the fertigation for your next run? From like, did you learn anything from this run that you're going to try different on the next to adjust it, or do you think you're just pretty happy with what you had going?
No, I think just increasing that volume to the total 2.5 gallons, like the Autopot's set up for. That'll be the only change that I make, and I'll keep running the same program until I get everything dialed in. And if I see there's anything um that needs to be adjusted, I can make those adjustments. I'm working with a lab out here who does testing for me for free because I'm helping them develop their protocols for their testing. And so I can send things like leaf tissue off to the lab and stuff just to see if I'm getting the
That's
right
awesome.
Yeah, that's
nitrogen
cool.
levels and stuff like that.
So
So
you're bottom feeding with just water, right? And top feeding with nutrients. You said only once every other week.
yeah.
Okay. And you were happy with the yield off those plants that you harvested?
Yeah, I mean, for a 1 gallon pot, yeah, definitely. I probably got, maybe an ounce and a half, 2 ounces of plant. I think approximately. I mean, that's
How
what I'm
big were the
getting.
plants? How much space did they take up? That 1 gallon pot doesn't mean much to me in terms of what you can harvest off of it, but how much space the plant took up. Not vertical space, but horizontal space. So how much of the floor area did the plant occupy?
Oh, not much, dude. Very, very small amount. I mean, if you're looking at this here, let me turn the camera back around.
Yeah.
So the Autopot system is 4 pots, right? It's
Uh-huh.
these two, which were the cocoa, and then these two, which were my soil, which obviously are a little bit better, but I'm much more skilled at doing soil. But it wasn't much, dude. It was just maybe a square foot, essentially.
Well, that plant that's there looks like it's like maybe 3 square feet.
Well, but these plants were a lot smaller because they were a lot smaller when I put them in there. They were just clones when I flowered, and these ones were already
Okay.
like established moms.
Okay.
So for what they were for flowering out clones in just a 1 gallon pot, I'm not disappointed at all. But again, I just harvested yesterday, so they're drying. I won't have.
Yeah, you don't have the full numbers yet. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
it
it's
really
a
seems like infrequent fertilization in cocoa. That's the sort of concern that I'd have more than anything. If you're doing such frequent bottom feeding of plain water, I'm surprised that they didn't need more frequent top feeding with the nutrients.
Well, that's because the humate has a really high nutrient use efficiency. Any of the synthetics are going to have about 10 to 15% use efficiency, and the humates, they stay available. There's no precipitation reactions. The plant can utilize all of it, and it just stays there. So it's and if someone wanted to do more frequent fertilizations, they can do that by cutting down the amount. Instead of doing 30 milliliters every 2 weeks, you can do 15 milliliters once a week, or you could do 2.5 milliliters every day. There's the way that you approach it. It's basically you can give it the same amount, but if you're going to do more frequent feedings, you cut down the actual total amount that you give it at a single time.
Okay.
But
We have a few
doing...
questions lined up. Darth Messiah asked, would adding raw brand dissolvable yucca extract to my wettable sulfur spray enhance the spread of the sulfur across the surface of the plant, helping with clumping in the sprayer? Question mark. See Doc shaking his head yes. Spartan.
Yeah, I
yes as well.
said yes in chat too. Adding a wetting agent, which yucca is a great wetting agent, a surfactant. It helps the spread on the leaves. It helps keep the nozzles from getting clogged up. It's generally a good idea. It is the smallest pinch of yucca powder that you can even imagine is all that's necessary. I mean, literally, it's like a pinch, especially if you're just mixing up like a quart for like a foliar application or something, like not much. Like you really don't need much
Like
yucca.
a couple grains.
Yeah, it's like, I mean,
Little
the
goes a long
dose is
way.
something like
Can't remember. I think it was
of
like
a teaspoon.
1/64th for
Yeah,
5 gallons or something.
it's an eighth of a teaspoon for 10 gallons. So it's an 80th
Okay,
of a
yeah.
teaspoon
Okay.
per gallon. And if you're doing a quart, then it's what, 320th of a teaspoon is what you need per quart. Okay, it's like a pinch. And you kind of know if you shake it up and it just becomes instantly like soapy water, you might have done a little bit too much. You should get like a little sudsy if you really shake it up. But if it just explodes into bubbles, that's maybe a little bit too much. Although it's not going to be the end of the world as a foliar.
We got some beautiful plant videography going on right now from Stairs at Plants. Welcome, Stairs at Plants. And Brandon Russ is also showing off some plants. So I spotlighted both of you. And
Hell yeah.
welcome.
How's it going, guys?
Doing good, better now.
Plants?
Going good, man. Love
Garden's looking great over there.
Yeah, just turned my lights on a little bit to give it more natural color. I got the two plants. These are all hot dog berry, which is a cross of 2020's hair of the dog cross to ethos Marionberry. So this was an unplanned germination that Hermes me a few years ago, and I decided for Doc's New Year's Grow Challenge that I'd go pheno hunting and I'd run 4 different seeds, which I'm doing just direct sowing in the HP Pro Mix. So 4 different phenos here, looking for a keeper. This one on the left is sort of has my eye. It's just a real nice looking plant. The height on it for my tent is real appealing to me. I've stripped the front 2 plants down. I still got to do the back 2. And
you don't have to. You don't have to do the back 2. Just wanted to put that out there.
Sure. What I like to do is I like to control the humidity with my D-leaf.
Yeah, okay.
So right now I'm running at about 55% humidity, and my temps are around 78. I try to keep it at. And as I'm in week 4 right now of flowers, so over the next 4 weeks I want to drop that humidity. So I'm just going to go in there a little bit and nip away some of them
Have you had
fan
problems
leaves.
with bud rot in the past?
No, I've never had bud rot.
Your humidity's already on the low end as far as I'm concerned. Like at this stage, I'd still be at about 65% humidity. I'd get down, under 60 at the end because I'm a little bit worried about bud rot, but I very rarely get my humidity as low as you already are. Just again, putting it out there in terms of how many leaves it's worth cutting off the plants to achieve that goal.
Sure. This run's been sort of weird. This is the first time I didn't supplement humidity. as we came out of the winter months into spring here in northern Michigan, we run real dry. And usually I'm running humidifiers. Sometimes I got to run 2 of them to keep up this time of year. And this year I said, screw it. I'm not going to chase the humidity. I'm not going to fill these things every day. I need my grows to be a little bit more easier. So let's just get rid of the humidifier for the first part of the grow. Because by now in the grow, I usually pull out the humidifier and put in the dehumidifier just to keep my temperatures during lights off and the humidity temperatures high during lights off and the humidity low. But this, like I said, this time I haven't did any supplemental humidity. I just gave them low humidity. And then once the greenery started going in there and giving its own humidity, they've been running off that for the last couple weeks now. So yeah, this is what I got. It's here on I posted on Grow Diaries, and it's also in Dr. MJ Coco's New Year's Grow Challenge. So just showing us off, and then he had a cloning challenge going off. So
there we go, your clones.
This is where I'm at with those, and this was just
good
for the first 2 weeks. I just put them in solo cups. I was gonna run solo cups, but then our light schedule's so low up here. I was having to put supplemental light on them to keep them from flowering. And then I decided just to put them in the cloner to make it easier for me. And they really took off in the cloner. I only lost 1. And like I said, no additives, no cloning gel or nothing. Just cut them, put them in RO water, and then didn't even pH the RO water in the cloner. They've just been running as they are.
Today they still in just RO water?
Nope. Today I put a little bit of bloom nutrients in, just like they're at like 0.8 EC, and then I when I put the bloom nutrients in, they the pH crashed, so I put a little pH up in it. So that's all they're on now. No CalMag, no silica, no anything that
no
the regular, no micros, nothing. Just the
Micro's got
GH.
the main source of nitrogen for them. If you're using a 3-part nutrient blend, most of the nitrogen is in micro. So they're probably going to become hungry for micro or for nitrogen. If they're not already, they should be soon. So just something to think about with the clones.
Sure. I use GH's 2-part series, not the 3-part. So it's a maxi grow and a maxi bloom.
Yeah.
And so the maxi bloom should have.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know which of the famous growers ran the maxi bloom from seedling to finish, but I don't know if it was Clack. No, Clack was Living Soil. One of the big name guys ran this GH maxi bloom because the nitrogen content in it is fairly high. But yeah, they smell real good right now. They have like a sweet smell, not like a berry, but just almost like a mango-ishy kind of tropical smell. And then on a stem rub, you get a little bit of that black burnt neoprene, like a wetsuit smell. And like I was saying in the chat earlier, these in the back here, they're growing and hitting my lights. So about 2 weeks into flower, I just came in and I topped them. And I know that isn't looked upon highly, but I've done it for a few grows now. When my plants come up and hit the light, instead of leaving them up there, I've just been knocking them down to like a canopy height. And honestly, I just did these like 3 days ago, and I'm 4 weeks into flower. And I guarantee you won't see really any difference of the back 2 that I topped compared to the front 2, which I didn't top. And the other cool thing that I've added are these moisture sensors from EcoWit. I picked up 4 of them, been running them, and they've really shown me like how the plants are drinking. You know, I would think that the back 2 would be drinking like way heavy, but it's surprising they like get into a sipping mode where these front two smaller ones actually are drying their pots out quicker than the back two are. So it's sort of cool to see all the data come in, and then it sort of puts to rest like all this thought that I had that like I got to keep an eye on these back ones where it's the front two that for some reason are either they're getting more air from the ceiling fan coming down and moving and drying the pot out or something, but they're needing to be fertigated more often than the back two, which is surprising to me.
You have a fan on the roof of the tent blowing down?
Yep.
That's going to be pushing the heat from the LED down onto the plants. Are you doing that on purpose?
Yeah, I run that. I just turned it down to once when the lights popped on so you could hear me. But usually, yeah, this is a whole vortex. Usually it's running on 3, and then this is how it runs. When I go into lights out mode, it turns the fan completely off. And but yeah, that's what I have. I took the driver off my LEDs and I ran that outside of the tent. So yeah, it pulls.
Most of the heat still comes from the LED bars, not from the driver itself. So those LED bars get hot, and then you're sort of pushing the air past them. Typically, we don't blow the air down from the bottom. The idea is to have the cool air enter at the bottom of the tent, have the hot, moist air sucked out of the top of the tent. We don't do a lot of trying to recirculate vertically. We do fans that blow laterally, but we allow the general flow of air to be up from the bottom and out the top of the tent. Just for what it's worth, you seem to be having good success with your method. I haven't really seen that much before, blowing down from the top of the tent.
The reason I'm doing this is I'm trying to dry these pots out as soon as I can. Just try not to let it stagnate for too long. And I have the pots up on risers, to let that air get underneath. And using the fabric pots to boot, instead of wrapping them with saran or plastic. Some people don't like them drying out so quick, but I seem to like having them dry out as fast as they can. And it seems like if I don't have the fan pushing hard, I'll get this sort of droopy plant look where it looks like they're overwatered. But if I crank up that fan to 3, and at first I was worried that I'd start to get wind burnt on these things, but nothing's showing wind burnt. I mean, everything is, for 12 hours a day, these things are getting cranked with a fan that's 12 inches away from them. And there's no signs of wind burn on anything here.
I'm not worried about the wind burn. I don't know that I agree with the idea of trying to get the pots to dry out. Like the plants should be sucking up the water and transpiring it. You don't want the water in the pot to just evaporate out because it's getting sort of wind blown on it. Sometimes when we have low fans and the fan's just blowing on one of the pots and it dries out that pot more, it creates problems because it elevates the EC that the plant's going to be exposed to as more water's evaporating and leaving sort of the salty water behind. But again, you're having good success with it. So
I think what he may be experiencing is with LEDs, a lot of people run a little cooler than necessary. And he said like 78 degrees and 55% RH. And 78 is like the low end of what I feel like is comfortable temperature. I'm like 78 to like 82 is where I like my plants under LEDs. And I think a lot of people run a lot cooler. Like 70 to 75, which I think is a little too cold for an LED, and then their plants aren't uptaking the nutrients as readily. So I think potentially the benefit that Stairs of Plants is getting here might be just from keeping it in that proper temperature range. And yeah, I don't know if it tends to get too much hotter. It sounds like you're coming off the cold season.
So I agree, Jack. Since it's a little bit on the cool side, blowing the hot air down on the plants isn't going to be quite as big of an issue. But the argument about defoliating was you didn't want to transpire too much, but then the argument about blowing air on the pots is like more evaporate. It just seems to not be all aligned in the same direction. I would have left more leaves on the plants and not blown air onto the pots in the same way, and maybe you'd be back at the same place.
Well, one of the reasons I pull the leaves off is because harvest time, I don't have time to deal with it then. What I like to do is progressively just slowly start stripping these plants to the point that the plants aren't getting affected by it. But,
they're already getting affected by it. You've already gone too far. Like, they're already getting affected by it. The leaves that are gone are now not harvesting the photons that would be hitting them. That's why we can see straight through the plants and down to the floor of the tent. So some photons are going right through the plant and down to the floor of the tent too. Like, if there was a leaf there to hit it, it would have been more photosynthesis, more energy that the plant could have translated into more bud. So that's why I've been kind of harping on this since the beginning, is I really don't like cutting leaves off the plants unless we have to, because it definitely hurts yield.
Yeah, I'll argue with a little pushback a little bit.
Sure.
I'm running my lights at roughly 70%. I could crank them up and give them the photons, and I mean, photons hitting the floor of the tent or the table or whatever, I realize that they're wasted, but the plants, I dim my lights.
Harvesting fewer photons than it would have been harvesting had it had those leaves.
Let's just say this: if you leave the plants in the back, kind of how they are right now, and like maybe only take a little bit off if it's absolutely like to prevent mold, see how the yield front versus back is.
Yeah.
Well,
Are
the
they
back,
similar? They're
the
different
back
females though,
two
right?
plants are the bigger two plants. So the yield on those are going to be bigger regardless. This plant in the front right here, this came in late. It's smaller because the other three plants were 2 weeks ahead of it, and this seed didn't pop, so I ended up popping the seed 2 weeks behind, and that's where this one is here. Now this one here, this is just a smaller statuophenotype. It had the same growing conditions as these two. And you can see that these ones back here are they grew in a lot more fuller. They were taller, which led to me topping them, and which led to, some of these tops here just giving me the double tops on them. So, it wouldn't really be fair to say at the end result, these are gonna.
It's not apples to apples.
No, I could go in the back and I could strip one of the two and then leave the other one and then run those. And I'd say that'd be more of a fair example, which I'd be open to doing that. But
I think if you just left the two in the back, you'd realize that they benefited from not having been defoliated the way the ones in the front had been. But yeah, you can try whatever sort of different experiments to prove that to yourself that you'd like to. The two plants in the back look very healthy and do not look like they are in any need of defoliation from my perspective.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, the only reason I do it is because come harvest time, I don't have time to be playing.
So the harvesting, the trimming that's difficult then are the sugar leaves, not the fan leaves anyway. So I'd push back on that. I don't think that cutting off your fan leaves now hurts the plant's, photosynthetic potential. It doesn't really make trimming any easier at this point. It's creating more work for you all throughout the grow without really saving you much effort at harvest time. So
my question is it trimming that, that stares at plants is having difficulty with, or is it other, like, because this is a home grow, right? So there are other maybe post-harvest things that are sort of constraining the process. Is that maybe the case? Is that what you mean?
Well, what it is for me is I lack space. I don't have much room for things. So once these go into trim mode, it's trimming, it's curing, it's drying, it's all of it. I don't have much space to do it. So when I do it, I like to do it quick and efficient. And when it's time to, harvest these, granted, there's only 4 plants here, but I'm a busy person, and to trim out 4 plants with a bunch of fan leaves on it, I've just learned over the years that if I can take a few fan leaves off here and there, and then when I get to the end, again, you can go on my grow diaries and look at some of my journals. Some of my plants just look like they got tennis balls of buds everywhere, and there's no leaf on them at all. But I mean, there's 80 buds on it, like it's holding little Christmas balls. So to me, it's just easier to trim off those nice clean buds when it's time to harvest, and dry and cure as need be, instead of finding. The other thing too is when you harvest a plant, if you don't trim off that leaf right away, then you have all that excess moisture that you got to deal with, that's off gassing as it's drying out. So mine is just out of laziness and lack of time is why I end up maybe
Is it
over
off
pruning
gassing?
well, dehydrating. What would you call the fan leaves losing their moisture?
Okay, so water vapor. Is that
Sure.
what you're thinking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would just say maybe a middle ground could potentially work then, if like instead of doing it this early into flower, do like what some people call like their pre-harvest de-leaf, where they go through, and because it's sort of like six in one, half dozen in the other. You're going to remove the leaves now or you're going to remove them later. But I think what Doc is maybe insisting is that if you allow them to photosynthesize for a longer percentage of the grow, like let's say to like the last week, maybe two, where you're almost ready to harvest, but not quite cutting them down. That's when I do kind of what you're describing throughout like the almost whole flowering process. Like I shape them up to get them ready for harvest, but not until like very close to the end. And at that point, it's like a similar situation. I'm busy. I only have so much time to put into the garden, so I'm going to take off a certain percentage of it before I actually chop the plants down.
And I guess the other thing that haunts me with vapor pressure or vapor coming off these is during lights out time, and I try to keep that humidity down during lights out. And short of putting a dehumidifier in the tent, which would mean I'd have to move my table back and make room for it, which I've done before, but it's just one more energy hog sucking energy too. So, part of me defoliating is to go after that nighttime humidity to get that down, sort of in the lower acceptable range of, I hate to say VPD, everyone's chasing VPD. And yeah, I try to look at it every now and then, but for me, I'm just looking at my plants, and when they look happy, I feel like I'm on the right path with them,
Sure.
Well, you're doing a
I'm
lot
definitely
right.
not advocating for adding a dehumidifier. I agree. Home growers and tents really shouldn't usually have to add dehumidifiers to create a good climate.
So how important is that nighttime humidity and
I think
VPD?
you're aiming for really low targets is one of the issues here. So I'm perfectly fine being in the 60s. Like I said, when the flowers are that big, it's very unlikely to get bud rot. Bud rot is the primary reason we're dropping humidity. So until the flowers get larger, I'm fine being at night up to 70% humidity with plants that are the size I'm looking at on screen right now. Granted, later in flower, I would want to be down towards 60% at night. But I think you're shooting for lower targets, and that's making you do more extreme measures to get there.
Definitely. Yeah. As it is now, I'm trying to keep around 55 at the nighttime, and that just keeps
I think that's lower than necessary. And really probably we talk about energy intense, like that's getting to that lower humidity. That's not, I mean, I don't know. You can argue in terms of what's best for the plant, but what's best for peak growing with lights on is always going to be closer to like 65 to 70% humidity. The only reason we drop it lower than that is to prevent bud rot. If it was just about growing the plants the best we could, we'd probably peg our relative humidity at about 70%. So living at 50%, it requires either extensive defoliation or dehumidification or, lots of other types of tricks that cost energy. And I don't believe you're getting much of a benefit out of that energy use, out of getting from 70 to 50% humidity at this stage of flower at lights off. I do want to stop and say, I feel like I'm giving you too much critiques. You're growing beautiful plants. And I mean, all of this is just some thoughts that you can mull over. I'm not trying to criticize you or how you've been growing. You're doing a great job.
No, and I keep the critiques coming because I learn off them and others do as well. So I mean, hearing your humidity numbers where 70 is acceptable, I mean, I can change my controller.
Not going to be acceptable maybe in 3 weeks. And how long ago did you flip? I think you told us, but I can't remember now.
This is end of week 4, so I'll be going into week 5 tomorrow.
Yeah, so by like end of week 6, and the flowers are really bulking up more, you would want to be at or below 60%. And again, the risk there being too high, it's not going to be that the plants don't grow well. The plants are going to grow better, but some of your larger buds may end up with bud rot. Like that's the risk of being higher in the humidity range later in the grow.
Sure.
When a lot of growers sort of try to whistle past that particular graveyard, sometimes successfully, sometimes they lose a couple of flowers. But yeah, there's just a lot of different ways to sort of approach this. I think trying different techniques maybe on some of the different plants and see how that works out, or adjusting your targets to sort of easier to hit ranges might really make things a little bit different for you. And maybe all it does is, save you a little bit of energy, but produce the same harvest.
Well, and save you a little bit of headache chasing these lower numbers and maybe thinking that you're at dangerous risk at the current point at higher numbers, which are more acceptable.
Oh, I definitely have growers all the time that like freak out. They're like, my humidity has gotten, into 65%. I'm like, that's probably no big deal. Like, you don't have to like freak out about it at that point. And they're running around like their hair is on fire. So, yeah.
I want to say welcome to Girthquake, who joined us a little bit ago. Cheers. I don't know if you want to show us the grow, if you just want to come hang out, maybe ask some questions live, but welcome.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I thought this would be funny. I don't have a lot of time, but I'm glad I caught you guys at the end because I'm working with the exact opposite of desert plants here. In the last couple of grows, I have not taken off a single goddamn leaf of anything, and it's been working out pretty goddamn good. These are my first 2 plants from fast buds. I've been doing nothing but auto flowers for like the last 6 or so harvests, and literally I just following Dr. Coco's online recipe and the schedule pretty much down to a T with everything except the never set up the drainage system. I got to go and pretty much drain to add just enough so there's no waste right now. So maybe I'm not pushing them as hard as I can be, but there's no need to like.
So you're not getting
vacuum
any runoff?
out my tank. No, I'm not getting any runoff. That's probably the only thing I'm doing a little different.
That's probably, that's a danger move when you're fertigating. It will absolutely lead to salt buildup in the media if you never get any runoff.
Here, I'm going to trigger you a little more, Dr. Coco. Check this out. No perlite either. There's a little algae buildup for you there.
I'm fine with no perlite. Those are small enough pots.
Yeah, these are 3. I think they're the number 3 air pots. This is only my first. These plants you're looking at right here. Actually, let me see. Do these ones have perlite? Yeah, these ones are perlite. So these are my first ones without any perlite. Actually, these ones here. So we'll see how they go. But they're looking exactly the same as how these ones started off.
Yeah, without perlite, it's a little bit harder to keep good root health at the stage that they're in. So if you look back at the plants that are down there, the 4 of them that you got there in no perlite pots, those plants are fairly small for the size container. So your goal is going to be to get the plants a little bit bigger, and then it'll be a whole lot easier to deal with the no perlite thing. Perlite makes that range between plant size and pot size a little bit more variable. It gives you a bigger window to work with. When you're not using perlite, it just makes the drainage, it makes water removal from the coco harder, and you depend on the plant to suck the water out of the pot, especially in the middle of the pot. And so, if the plant's not big enough, it's going to take a while for it to suck that water out, basically. It won't drain through there very well without perlite.
I took a tip from you about watering by hand, like with actual just straight up water too. And I will say I did one run, my first or second ever hydro run that I did. I didn't water like maybe once every week or 2 weeks to kind of break up the tension going through the pod and get the water to go through more. I mean, I'm adding a little bit of a surfactant, but point being, watering once every week or 2 weeks really does help them. And I think without perlite, maybe it's a little more essential and it helps with that issue that you were just talking about.
Do you have an
So that's
EC
kind of
meter?
cheating.
You mean with plain
Yeah,
water
I
or
haven't
with
used it in a while. Go ahead. What were you saying?
I was just asking about EC meter because without runoff, I would guess maybe what Doc was kind of alluding to when he said it's a little bit risky is if it's not like 100,000% dialed in to like the perfect level, it's easy for there to be a little bit of a EC buildup. Like a couple of the plants on the right side, a few of them are looking a little bit yellow, and I would guess
Yeah.
more so that it's because of lockout than because of
Yeah.
lack of nutrient. And I would say that there's
Yes.
the EC is probably in like the 3 or 4 plus range, and they're
Yeah.
just having a hard time uptaking. Whereas if you get it down to like that 1.5 to 2 range, I'd say like 1.16, 1.7 at this point would be fine probably for them, especially with the fertigation that you've got where you can dose it a few times a day. Just knowing having that runoff a little bit where you can test and say like, oh, I put 1.5 in and 1.6 came out, everything's good. But if you say I put 1.5 in and 3.6 came out, you're like, okay, there's buildup in the media, and that might be causing lockout and other issues.
Yeah, if you get it really dialed in, Jack, you can get less buildup, but in cocoa, you're still going to get buildup every single time that you don't get runoff because we're giving a pretty heavy dose of CalMag. Cocoa's taking that CalMag and putting sodium and extra potassium into the solution. This sodium is not getting taken up by the plant. Most of the potassium probably won't either. A lot of the CalMag is kind of there too, but the sodium in particular becomes a problem. Like the only place for it to go is out with the runoff. And if you get runoff, it'll stay dissolved. It'll wash out with the runoff. If you don't get runoff, it'll build up in your media and eventually create lockout issues with other nutrients with your plants. So we're both saying, girthquake, you gotta get some runoff. I would say every single time you fertigate, but Jackie is saying a good point. Get some, do it once and measure the runoff and see where you're at. But it's definitely going to be pretty high. And that is, I agree, why the bigger plants are yellowing near the bottom. They're locked out.
Well, and it's not preventing them from creating frosty bud, but you might just get more frosty bud if it was more close because like they're also getting a little bit of that like yellow tip where they call them like some people say they're like painted fingernails, but it usually to me is a sign that it's a little bit locked out where you've got just a little bit too much nutrient and it's just kind of showing you like, hey, you need to dial it back into a range where maybe it'd be a little bit happier. But that being said, it's not preventing them from I bet you those buds smell great, and they definitely what you showed earlier was very frosty. So we're not hating. We're just giving a few suggestions on what potentially might create a little bit larger yield and more of that amazing frosty homegrown bud. And I saw it looked like you maybe had some of the predatory plants and things like that. So really cool other side of the garden as well. So thank you for showing off your garden. Thank you for stopping in with us. We always appreciate everybody who comes in and shows off the garden and is gives us updates.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Everybody go grow carnivorous plants. I got to go eat dinner. See you next time.
Have a good dinner.
Thanks for sharing. That red plant was really cool looking.
We got to do that carnivorous plants episode sometime.
Absolutely, I'm down for it. I'm setting up there's a lot of them popping up, especially if you live on the West Coast. You guys might see them, but there's a lot of carnivorous plant stores popping up. But I'm actually launching my own here first quarter of this year. Gonna have to go under a different name, honestly. Got some fun stuff going on the side in a different tent, but I'm pretty excited I'm actually trying to launch some cannabis products too. Like there's going to be some cannapanions where carnivorous plant IPM, a lot of stuff. I'll be reaching out, but glad to talk to you guys again.
Well, stuff. Well, Stairs at Plants has some Venus flytraps, it looks like, over here going on.
Look at that. Very nice, my friend. Very cool. Hey, fun fact for you. The Venus flytrap is actually named after a vagina. Look into it. You didn't hear it from me.
I just heard it from you.
Facts.
Oh, that's great.
Sorry
Thanks
for your
stopping
HK.
in.
Talk soon, guys. See ya.
Have a good dinner.
Peace out.
Peace. Thanks for coming in.
This used to be in my tent, except for they like super moist environment, and keeping this moist was just keeping the fungus gnats in my tent. So I had to pull it out, and then it went under 12-12 light. So that's why it's almost molting out. Now that it's next to the clones here, it's getting more of a veg schedule light. You can see that it's starting to pop a seed out and some new growth. But yeah, they're nice. My girlfriend brought this home from the store with her, so I added it to my collection.
It's fun, different. Always appreciate that kind of stuff. And I know Spartan's into the other plants as well. Maybe not growing carnivorous, but he grows all sorts of different kinds of plants. And I can't believe it, but it's already 5:45 here on the West Coast, which means I got to pass it over to Spartan for his final thoughts and shout outs before he gets heading on over to the Michigan Bros Grow Show.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I love plants, man. Cannabis was a gateway to other plants for me. That's what it was, a gateway for me to grow all these other plants, especially ones I can eat. I like that. But shout out to everybody in chat. I like these episodes where we do these where we get people to come on and show their gardens. So shout out to everybody who was able to do that. Shout out to Brandon for showing his garden. I love that experiment with in the coco. That's cool. I'd say that's successful already. So shout out to that. And then shout out to the Michigan Bros Grow Show. I want to be there in about 15 minutes. So you can catch me there. Otherwise, much love and keep growing.
Thanks as always, Spartan.
Peace out, Spartan.
Keep growing.
Something I just thought of, thought of earlier and I typed out was the fan running over the LED. You don't see that much, and it used to be back in the early days of LEDs. A lot of manufacturers had fans in there as a way of like heat sink or heat dissipation to cool their fixture. And one of the things I think, whether it's LED, HPS, or CMH, whatever it is, a cooled bulb, I think, runs a little bit more efficiently. So I think by blowing that fan over there, it's running slightly more efficient. So it'll extend the longevity of that LED, which is already going to be long lasting. And he said he's running at 70%. So stairs at plants, that thing's going to last you a long time with nice air cooling. It's probably already naturally, bar style doesn't get super hot anyway because the diodes are dissipated or distributed in a way that the heat sort of naturally dissipates up and out of that bar with the usually aluminum alloys and different construction mechanisms that they have to sort of naturally dissipate the heat. But yeah, you can see right there, there's blades on the back of the bars there, which are acting as heat sinks in this case. But I remember like my light is like a cob LED, has like these giant metal beams coming out of it, and they're like a 3 or 4 inch long heat sink. I think I said metal, but I'm thinking again, it's probably also aluminum alloy of some sort to be light, but also durable. And it's just interesting to see it. It evolved so quick from like blurples to cobs to bars that are just like pretty uniform now and across the board. Even the entry level stuff is very good quality. I mean,
Yeah, they
not
usually
like
use aluminum for heat sinks because the aluminum gives up its heat very quickly. Like it releases the heat. It has a great emissivity.
it's a very interesting from I'm just into like aircraft, cars, all sorts of different things.
Yeah,
And
aluminum's
its
cool.
durability, lightness, strength, especially like depending on what you blend with it to make that alloy, because it could be like, a tin can, like a soda can, right? But it could also be like,
Yeah, well, that's I think the problem. We use most aluminum for like beer cans when it's like one of our most awesome metals to do other things with. But yeah,
yeah, I
The
mean,
heat the heat sinks on these lights remind me a lot of if you get into gaming computers or building computers, the heat sinks that they use either for the CPU or the memory or things like that. They're all these big aluminum heat sinks with big fins and big fans to move that cool air over them to get that heat loss to go. And in the computer world, the top gaming rigs are run by liquid cooling. So I almost wonder if that is the next point of LED lights is to liquid cool.
I've talked to manufacturers about this. I had a couple of interesting conversations at the MJ BizCon last year, specifically about going to water cooling. It's just, I mean, there's been companies that have done it, but it's one of these things where the juice probably isn't worth the squeeze. Like the amount of efficiency you're able to gain out of running at lower temperatures isn't worth the complication of setting up the water cooling system.
where you're seeing it
I also
still,
feel the same is true for computers. I feel like it used to be more in vogue maybe 10 years ago or more, but nowadays I think people aren't into like water cooling and overclocking as much. There's people who do it, I can't say that that's not true, but I don't know how commonplace it is
The CPUs have
currently.
gotten more efficient too, Matthew. I think that might have something to do with it. Like there's
It depends
Absolutely.
what you're doing.
That's
I
that I
mean,
agree with.
some
yeah.
people out there mining crypto or whatever, just, pushing their devices to the limit or whatever. It could be a cost benefit analysis. Like, yeah, water cooled isn't the most efficient up to date technology, but I could buy 10 of those water cooled machines versus like one of the, most modern aluminum alloy with
Right.
the fancy 4-inch computer fan that cycles everything through at a certain rate or whatever. So it really comes down to the scale that you're doing things at and what you're using it for.
I
But it is
agree with
interesting.
Berkshire Bud's comment that it's if you want to make your light more efficient, the cheapest way to do that is just use more diodes and drive them at a lower amperage. And that really works. And there's some companies that do that. And if you're willing to spend more for a light, I would look for a light that's got a really high diode count, not like a gimmicky water cool system that may break or may spray water over my plants or who knows.
That's my concern is the liability. Like I was working with the grow here in San Diego, and part of the thing is like liability. Like they need to have a specific thing so that the fire truck can come up to their property, and all the code has to be like cleared with the local fire department and having like sprinklers and this and that. You've already got like water and all these other piping and things up there. Like water adds weight and weight adds more liability. Like the fixtures up there, like you're going to make them weigh more by running water through them to make them cool when there's other options that exist. And like Doc was saying, like you almost don't even have to run the lights at a level to get them that hot at this point. It's I definitely think juice is not worth the squeeze on the water cooled LED lights of today's day and age, but you're seeing it in like I think they're using it in certain supercharging technologies for vehicles and things like that. So some uses where it's ultra high capacity or like computers that are overclocking, still probably being implemented, and probably other things, other fluids that are not water, are able to be used as well. So it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see.
Water and electricity don't mix too well sometimes.
Yeah. That was definitely the message back from one of the manufacturers I was talking about. It was like, it's just a disastrous thing to try to add to an LED light. Like you want us to plumb water lines around this thing. And in order for it to be effective, like we got to realize that the points of heat are the individual LED diodes. So like the water's got to come everywhere, right up against like, the backs of the LED diodes, like down every bar or whatever. It's an engineering headache.
Well, and then the water heats up after so long, so it's like you have to cycle it out of a system and get it far enough away from that heat source that it
Right.
cools enough to be recycled and used again, which is engineering feat that is a lot more difficult than it might sound like when we're describing just, oh yeah, water cooled, whatever. It's just like
Yeah.
some
So
stuff's not set up well to have that sort of exchange and flow away and flow back.
yep. Yep. You need a radiator somewhere, and you're not going to have a car that's like driving 60 miles an hour down the freeway with the wind blowing against it. So you're going to have to do something with that.
It is fascinating what we figure out though with engines, motors, and electronics, heating and cooling. It's fascinating. We're capable of, something as simple as getting these shows off the ground, which probably 100 years ago would have been, damn difficult to have a radio show or video. Well, video show absolutely would not be broadcastable by some, random person at their house. And now technology with laptops and the internet makes it available for us to, in high definition, with, the audio quality, whatever our microphones are capable of recording, put it out there to the people instantly, and then have it saved forever on multiple different platforms. It's really kind of unbelievable the amount of access it's given to people. I know everybody has a podcast at this point. It sounds like if you look around, but they're I'm glad because the ones that are worth listening to gain traction and gain followings, like the lovely community that we have here. I'm very thankful for Girthquake and for Stares at Plants and everybody else who stopped in. There was over 100 again with us. Whenever I see that, it's just like, holy shit, this is very humbling because If you've ever been in a room with 100 people and you're not extremely extroverted, 100 people is a lot of fucking people. And even if they're all there for the same common interest, it's like talking about weed or smoking weed, things like that. Even like once a week, I think that I'm happy to some extent that this is like a digital media. Like I would love to do a live show someday, but I wouldn't want this to be like a every Sunday live event with an audience because admittedly, I'm probably a little bit more on the introverted side. And as much as I do enjoy going out to the events, I like to have it be every now and then, I'll go out and fucking get that charge of energy. And I do enjoy it, but it's just as much as it's exciting, it can also be draining to expend all that energy, ride that wave, ride that high. And it's worth doing though. I love those experiences. So I look forward to more live events, whether it's music festivals or shows with you all. And I know that Brandon and Matthew will be coming together here in the next little bit. But before I pass it over to my regular panelists, I want to give it to our guests who joined us in the second half, Stairs of Plants. Thank you so much again for joining us. Let the people know where they can find you. And if you have any final thoughts or shout outs, you can go ahead and drop those now.
All right. Thanks, Jack. Stairs of Plants, you can find me at Grow Diaries or at Dr. MJJ Coco's Coco for Cannabis under the New Year's Grow Challenge. Thanks for hosting, Jack. Thanks for the panel. And thanks for everyone who shows up week after week to keep the conversation going. Thank you all.
Thanks for coming on, Stairs at Plants.
I'm also very thankful for all the great people in the chat, both listening live right now and the people who come afterwards. It's humbling, really, to see the numbers of people that come back week after week. We're at 256 or something, I think this week was. So amazing to continue it, keeping it going. And listening back to some of those early episodes on the Spotify, you can like click that button like oldest first. And I went back and listened to like episode like 60 through like 70, and it was still like alternating hosts. Like I would host one week, Doc would host one week, but it was more just like we hadn't decided generally that any one of us was the host yet because it was still under Shane was kind of like still doing a little bit of his hosting thing here and there. So it was always being passed around ultimately. And then I took over for the remainder, I guess, at a certain point because I was the one who can make it most consistently, I think, is really what it came down to. But it really has been a joy doing this. And I'm now uploading it to X. So if you want to find it on x.com, you can go to @JackGreenstock or Jack_Greenstock. And I'm doing it every Monday. So you can find this recording there. And you might be listening to this right there. But with that said, I want to pass it next to Matthew Gates.
A good show. I like the chat, I like the questions. I like that we had two people coming on to talk. Those are definitely nice. And I think we do get to learn a lot of cool things when we share. We haven't seen Dog Doctor in a while, for example. But if you want to see me and Brandon, we can check me out and check us out at the Living Soul Summit, March 7th, 8th, and 9th. And that'll be in Pahrump, Nevada. You can check it out there. That's coming up this week. So I'm excited. I have a presentation about that. And you can check me out at zentinol.com for professional inquiries and youtube.com/zentinol for plant health videos and things like that.
Well, safe travels to you as well as the person who I'll pass it to next is Brandon Rust.
Thanks for having me again. Yeah, same thing. I'm going to be out in Nevada for the Soil Summit. I will be on the breeders panel, and so you guys can hear me speak as well. And I'm also going to be in Barcelona. If anybody's going to be out there, I'll be speaking at the Organic Cup, and I'll be doing a bunch of stuff with Skunk Magazine out there. So yeah, that's cool. And then check out the website. Make sure you check out the website because there's a ton of cool blogs on there that we wrote and that we publish every week. So
Great time, great content, great information. Brandon's always putting out amazing informational content for free and amazing products. So check them out for sure. And next up, we got Dr. MJ.
Hey guys, I had a lot of fun. I'm happy I was able to be here for the full show. Enjoyed getting into it with our growing guests and with the chatters in the chat. The whole show is about this kind of thing, so it's always fun, and I hope I haven't rubbed anybody the wrong way today. You can find me at Coco for Cannabis, of course. Check out my YouTube channel. I'm currently working on a series of videos. It's probably gonna be a few weeks before they start coming out, though. I'm doing a series, LED grow light buyer's guide, kind of breaking down the different metrics and discussing what specifically I would want to do or what I'd look for in buying a light. So you can check that out or start looking for that in a few weeks. But always fun. Check out my YouTube. Check us out on Coco for Cannabis. I have a Patreon show. So Dr. MJ Coco on Patreon. And I'll be here next week. Grow love.
Great having you as always. And next, I'll pass it over to Noah the Grower, who's showing off his beautiful garden once again.
Yeah, I had a good show. I was always learn something, and I learned about the Venus flytrap today. You learn something new every day. But yeah, my plants are having a good time over here. I'm Noah the Grower. These plants right here, probably about 10 days from 12-12 flip. I don't do it how Doc does it. I do it bam, 12-12 right off the bat. I've always done it that way. I believe in that. That's my own personal grow science thing that I've done. I've done it both ways. I like it that way myself. These ones right here are about this is probably about 25, 26 days from 12-12 flip. And these right here are 45 days. So yeah, I'm Noah the Grower. You can find me on Instagram. I'll see everybody next week.
Thank you so much, Noah. Always great having you. Pleasure seeing your garden and just great to have your input as always. And I believe, last and certainly not least, we've got the American one.
Jack, as always, thanks for the knockout hosting job. You always do awesome by us. And thanks to everyone that came on, showing their grows off. I'm living vicariously through you right now, kind of. And peace to everyone in chat. And yeah, I'm the American one. Most of you know where to find me on the IG or whatever. Just look for the little guy with the top hat. And yeah, we'll see you next week, or I'll probably see you in chat somewhere in between. Have a great one, everybody.
Great having you as always, Tao. Pleasure to be here with everybody. I really do enjoy this every week. Look forward to it. It's good to be back now for 2 weeks in a row. I missed it the 1 week about 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago at this point. I don't know. But yeah, you can find me at Jack Greenstock on Instagram. Jack_Greenstock is my account on X, what used to be called Twitter. And if you want to email me, jackgreenstock47@gmail.com. My website is 50strains.com, where you could get seeds and books. Still on sale, 24% off. So cheers to everybody who showed up this week. Always a pleasure having you. And I'll catch you all next week. Peace out.
Grow love, everyone.